Thank you very much, and I appreciate your kind words. But please allow me to also acknowledge that today we meet on the lands of the Dharawal people and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge any other fellow Aboriginal people in the room here today as the traditional custodians on the lands that we all come from. I'm particularly delighted to be here with Mayor George Grace, and I again take this opportunity to thank him for his hard work during his time as Mayor, and he's not contesting the next election. And I thank him for his 16 years on council, is it George? 16 years of service to Campbelltown, where I know that he has given it all that he's got, and he certainly came into the position with so much work to do and done a very good job at it as well. I want to acknowledge, of course, the Minister who's not here anymore, my good friend Paul Scully, who isn't just a good friend to me, he's a good friend to Campbelltown. He always takes my calls. He always is responsive to any and every issue that we have around planning and development. I want to broadly acknowledge Campbelltown City Council, who I'm very privileged to have a really good working relationship with. Lindy Dietz, the General Manager, the Deputy General Managers Jai and Ben, as well as all the directors who I know have a passion for our city and to see us get the best outcomes that we can. And working with them and supporting them is something that I really enjoy and something so important. I see Liverpool Council is here as well. I want to acknowledge Liverpool Council, I think Wallandilly Council. I'm not sure if there's any Camden Council people in the room, but everyone from the local government sector as well. My good friend and Mr. Chris Brown, who is also here. Thank you to Adam and Chris for bringing together today from the Western Sydney Leadership Dialogue. I also would like to acknowledge my former colleagues in the room here today, Duncan Gay, former Roads Minister, Luke Foley, former leader of the Labor Party, and of course the former member for Wallandilly, Jai Rao. It's good to be here with those former colleagues coming together with our common interest. Well, this is a fantastic forum because it's one of the hottest topics that we are all talking about, whether it be in the public sector or the private sector. Why? Because we need homes, we need houses, and I know that you are all committed to our joint interest of not just constructing and building a home, we want to build communities. And I see walkers in the room here today, as well as all the other developers. I saw Terry Goldacre, I believe the Vitocco family, they're here as well, Landcom of course, who are all working together to build communities, not just construct houses. And when you look at the plans being proposed to the south of Campbelltown, down towards Appin, finding that balance between housing supply, building communities, having a sustainable environment and the sensitive issues that surround that, I know that they are all working very hard towards achieving that balance. The reason I know that is because I unapologetically work very closely with them all. Why? Because I believe best outcomes are achieved by working together. Industry, the private sector, is one of the most important stakeholders during the journey of delivering houses. Why? Because the industry is building them. And they legitimately want to build good homes in good communities that people are happy to be in. Casting my memory back when I was the Mayor of Camden, and Paul mentioned about Gregory Hills. I actually signed off on Gregory Hills when I was the Mayor of Camden, as well as Oran Park as well. So I can definitely relate. And I note David Taylor is here as well. Mate, Arnold would never forgive me if I don't come down and say g'day to you before I leave, so I will. But I remember working well at that time and the benefits that come together by working together to build those communities. And Gregory Hills is a great example of that. And Paul was right, that it's absolutely ridiculous. It's absurd that to think that we're now just opening a public school in that beautiful suburb. That's not because of the developers or industry, that's quite frankly because government dropped the ball. They didn't have the priority focus on the delivery of services and infrastructure to growing communities so that those families and those communities can live and prosper in a good, sustainable, well-lived community. That was happening in Gregory Hills, and I remember very well. But again, it's a great example as to the importance that we have from government to put the attention where it needs to be. That's where the attention of Minister Scully is, that's where the Premier's attention is, that's where my attention is, and that's where all of my colleagues' attention is. Why? Because existing and future residents need and deserve it, and if we don't put that attention in a microscopic way into those specific growth areas, as we do here in Campbelltown, it just won't happen. I want to touch on one of the other important issues, and before I come more specifically to sustainability, and that is, as sure as we have Western Sydney, it used to be Greater Western Sydney, but now we have Western Sydney in the southwest, there's significant challenges and opportunities that exist in Western Sydney, and when I say Western Sydney, I'm talking from the Cumberland, Parramatta, down through Blacktown and Penrith, and the challenges and opportunities that exist in Penrith are very different to those in Parramatta. Equally as such, the challenges and opportunities that exist along the southwest corridor are considerably variant when you go from Liverpool to Campbelltown. We have long carried our fair share in housing growth, and I'm certainly no NIMBY, but I certainly do agree that I think every community should carry their fair share of delivering the houses for their communities. That has not been the case in the past, and having that realignment, I know, is something that the Premier and Minister Scully are very focused on. And that is only a fair and just position for any fair and appropriate government to have, and I fully support that. But again, equally, the consistency between the delivery of houses needs to be aligned with the delivery of services and infrastructure. And Minister Scully was right, that the frustration of someone who lives in a house, flushes their toilet but has no sewerage. It's an absurd proposal. Jai Rao would be aware of that when he was the member for Wallandilly, because when you go further down to the south, you'll find many examples where that's not the case. That's why we're seeing the government and walkers take a proactive approach to ensure the houses that they're building down in those future communities are built so that those people are getting what they need. Equally, I know Landcom are passionate about that as well. Again, one of the most important facets of sustainability. Adam, this red light's going. Am I meant to stop talking soon, mate? Is that the shut up button? But anyway, I won't be too much further. I also want to acknowledge the departmental staff that are here from transport planning and other areas throughout government. Very important people who are equally as passionate as the sector itself. But we do know, and it comes down to, that housing affordability is one of the biggest single pressures facing the people of New South Wales, with mortgage payments or rent largest expense for nearly every household. And it's got to a point where there's people who don't have an issue with affording to pay rent because they can't get a rental property because there's not enough houses. It's as simple as that. I remember speaking at a forum some time ago, and I copped a bit of community flack because I stated, whilst ever we choose to live in houses and not trees and caves, we've got to build houses. It's as simple as that. The economics of it, let alone just the social element to it, dictates that we need to build houses. We know when you don't supply houses, you inflate the market, and it is inflated to a point that is ultimately unaffordable. I've got two boys looking to enter the housing market. One of them's an electrician, the other one's still at University of Wollongong studying science. Electricians are paid very well. He can't afford to get into the market. He's 23 years old, and he just can't do it because he can't afford it at the moment. So we will have to support him in some way or another, and we're happy to do that. But the reality is a lot of people aren't in the same position as me and his mum. So that is a representation, a real lifetime representation as to the choices and challenges that young people are having today, as well as parents as well. But confronting the housing crisis is a shared responsibility. We seek cooperation with councils like I have in Campbelltown, not opposition. And I do reiterate the good working relationship I have with Council means that we can work together to achieve those goals. I'm very fortunate to have in my electorate, I believe, one of the best performing councils in New South Wales. In a former life, I used to be the Shadow Minister for Local Government, and I was very much across each and every one of the 128 councils in New South Wales. And seeing my own council work so hard, whether it's a Liberal government or a Labor government, it is irrelevant. They want to work together with government at every level. Why? Because that's what the people of Campbelltown need and deserve. Equally, we need and deserve to have the priority attention of government because we are a growth centre. We are part of an area that is consistently continuing to grow. And we've got to be fair income. We have not received that consistency for the delivery of attention and infrastructure in the past. It has not happened. I'm not going to do, I don't have a rear vision mirror approach to this. I'd rather look out through the front window so we can see where we're going and keep that foot on the accelerator. I do want to touch on the sustainability of our local environment and particularly our koala habitat, which is a real passion we have in and around the Macarthur region, particularly here in Campbelltown. I am advised that koala numbers have gone up considerably in the colony around Campbelltown for a number of different reasons. We haven't had any fires, which generally reduces the population of koalas for obvious reason, but I do believe it's because of a joint effort between our levels of government, and having the Georges River Koala National Park and more than $80 million contributed to achieve that is something so important. And that policy and funding was established in cooperation with local government sector, both in Wallandilly and Campbelltown, and the private sector, who are equally as committed to see the preservation of koala habitat in every way and everywhere that we can. But I think when you look at some of the things more locally, and the investments, we're seeing progress on the Appin Road, which is truly welcomed. I know Lend-Lease have worked very hard to cooperate with government. I know Walkers and the other stakeholders to the south are equally as committed to work with government to see the delivery of that vital piece of infrastructure that was once a country track that connected a town to a village and a village down to the beautiful Illawarra. It is now a major arterial between two very important regions, not only for us as the gateway to the southwest of Sydney, but for the New South Wales economy too, because we are connected by our shared responsibility of delivering those homes and having an equitable approach when it comes to the delivery of services. I don't believe of taking something from somewhere just for the sake of doing so. I believe good governments govern for all, with an agenda that puts the priority focus for the needs, dreams and aspirations of the people that we are privileged to serve. In the absence of that, there will not be adequate funding, there will not be adequate policies in place, and I do believe previously that was the case, because we didn't see an equitable approach. Just on the Appin Road, I note Duncan Gay in the room here, and I reflect back to 2015, and Duncan was the Roads Minister, and I was making copious amounts of representations for the Appin Road. Duncan came out when he was Minister. I hopped in the car with him. He drove the entire length of the Appin Road, down and back. And he's from a trucking background, and I used to run coal trucks up and down that road whilst I was studying and paying off a mortgage and stuff like that. So I knew all too well the dangers of it, and before we knew it, that was just before the budget, Duncan very generously and appreciated from me kicked a tin for $8.7 million for the realignment along the road. It wasn't everything we needed. We didn't see the dual carriageway, but he saw how unsafe it was and the amount of lives that we had lost on that road, and he was determined to support our community to get it, and I'll be forever appreciative of that. There's other investments that we're seeing, particularly on the Spring Farm Parkway. There's going to be more to be said by John Graham, the Roads Minister. But in the budget, there was a further, I think, $15 million state and federal funding for Stage 2 of the Spring Farm Parkway, as well as other priority attentions for the Greater Western Sydney bus service, as well as a considerable amount of money for the Sydney rail business. We do need to see rail connection from Campbelltown and the Macarthur to the Western Sydney Airport. Having connectivity to the Western Sydney Airport in, an equitable approach that does not exclude the West, but it should not exclude the Southwest. And we are the gateway to the Southwest, Campbelltown and Macarthur. I may be biased because I am the member for Campbelltown, but even if I wasn't, I believe anyone, and even Liverpool would agree, the connectivity to the Western Sydney Airport from the Macarthur is absolutely vital to ensure that Western Sydney Airport has every opportunity to reach its full potential. It is all about connection. It has been said by many, including Infrastructure Australia, that freight is vital to the success of Western Sydney Airport. There's been a lot of time, a lot of effort and a lot of money invested in that airport. That's why that we need to see the government's attention remain and focus, and I do acknowledge the federal government who have a very progressive and accelerated approach to achieving that. But I also am very aware as well that the connection between the primary and secondary airports in any other cities, that secondary airport has never really reached its full potential. And I would draw your attention to the two airports in Heathrow and Gatwick, as well as Newark and JFK Airport in New York. Newark, great airports, don't get me wrong, but has Newark and Gatwick reached their full potential? No, they haven't. And I know that because I did a study tour some years ago and I visited those and I specifically focused on the secondary airports. But it's a great example. It's a great example as to that importance. There's been a lot of good work that has gone in to Western Sydney Airport, but let's not kid ourselves. There's so much more that needs to be done. Just like here in Campbelltown, the Justice Precinct will be an economic trigger for growth, for education, and I know that the government has done a lot of work in pursuing that. As Campbelltown Council have done actually most of the work, and I must credit them for that. But there's so much more that we need to do, and we need the support of the federal government and the family court to be established in the precinct as one of the final stages to ensure its success. Just in closing, I particularly am delighted to see the diversity of housing that allows people to stay within their communities and neighbourhoods through different stages of their life. Housing choice means more options for everyone, renters, families and empty nesters. We can't afford to have a whole generation of people who can't buy or even rent a house. It's simply not the Australian way, but there are economic consequences for that which we are all experiencing right now. And it has to change. If we want our kids to be able to afford to live or rent a home in Sydney, that's why we're seeing the step changes that we are, and that's why it's getting the priority and rightful priority attention that it needs and deserves. I want to thank you all for coming to Campbelltown, and in closing, I sincerely appreciate the contribution that you all make, whether you're in the private sector or the public sector, to ensure that we address this issue of housing supply. And again, I reiterate, is one of the most primary focus of the sector, of course, and of course of the government. I'm proud to work with the private sector and I'm proud to work with the government, and frankly I will work with anyone in the pursuit of that prosperity because our local families need and deserve it. Thank you so much, and I wish you all the best for the remainder of the session.